In this lecture, we're going to handle submitting the form for editing the song. You can find the form in the template block. There are two input fields for the title and genre. The goal is to bind both inputs to their respective data, add validation, and submit the form data to Firebase. You've learned how to accomplish these tasks throughout this course. This will be a great opportunity to try this out yourself. You have the knowledge to tackle this feature. Try making this form functional on your own. Pause the video and good luck. Welcome back. If you were able to solve this, that's great. If not, that's fine as well. We'll tackle it together. The first thing we'll do is validate the form. We want to prevent users from submitting the form if the inputs are valid. It's typically the first step we should take when working on forms. In the template, search for the form element. It'll be inside the second div tag. We're going to replace this element with the vForm component. The vForm component will validate the fields placed inside it. It'll generate a form element when we view the page. If we look inside the form, there are two fields, one for the title and another for the genre. We are going to add rules for both inputs. We can add the rules directly to the inputs. Alternatively, we can add a validation schema. A validation schema is an object of rules that will apply to our inputs. It'll make our code look a whole lot cleaner. We're going to go with a validation schema. Scroll down to the data function. We will add a new property called schema. Its value will be an object. The property name will refer to the name of the input field. The values for the properties will be the list of rules to apply to the input field. Let's add one property called modified name. The rules will apply to the title will be the required rule. The modified name property is where we are storing the name of the file. There are two properties for storing the name, one for the original, another that can be freely modified. Next, we'll add another property called genre. We'll apply the alpha spaces rule to this input. The genre input will be completely optional. If a user decides to provide a value, we will restrict the characters to alphabetic and space characters. Genres typically don't have numbers or strange characters in them. vValidate knows our rules. The next step is to tell it about our inputs and their rules. Back in the template, add a property called validation schema to the vForm component. We will bind this property to the schema data property. Next, we need to tell vValidate which inputs it should validate. The first input in our form is for the song title. We are going to convert this input from an input element to the vField component. This component will generate a field that will have validation performed on it. The attributes can stay on the component since they'll be passed on to the element it generates. We're going to add one property called name. The value for the name property must correspond to the property name we have in our schema object. We're going to set this property to the modified name property in our schema. We're going to do the same to the second field. Convert it from an input element to the vField component. Next, we'll add the name property. It'll be tied to the genre property in the scheme. Our fields will be validated, but the user won't know what's wrong with their field unless we output some errors. Feedback will help the user remedy the error. Let's handle the errors next. We'll start with the first field. Under the field component, add the error message component. We'll set the class attribute to textRed600. This class will change the text color to red. Next, we'll set the name property to modified name. If we want to grab an error for a specific field, we can retrieve the errors by its name. The name of the property must match the name we assigned the field in the name property. If there isn't an error, the error will not appear. The markup and expression will be the same for the second input. Since that's the case, we'll copy the error message component entirely. Then, we'll paste it under the second input for the genre. We'll modify the name attribute to genre. We have completed validating the inputs. There are two more things we should do before we move on to the next step. Firstly, we should add some initial values to the fields. Currently, each field will be empty. We will want to pre-fill them with their respective song data. On the vForm component, we can pre-fill our fields by adding the initial values property. We are going to bind this property to the song prop. The second thing we're going to do is listen for the submit event. vValidate will make sure the inputs are valid before firing the submit event. We can safely listen for the submit event on the vForm component. The name of the function we will want to run will be called edit. This method doesn't exist in our component. Let's define it. In the component options, we will add the methods object. Inside this object, we will add the edit method. In this function, we will log a message to verify it was called. Let's test our form. In the browser, try submitting the form with invalid values. We will receive errors from the validator. That's the behavior we were looking for. Let's attempt to input some valid values and submit the form. In the console, we will find our message. We've successfully validated the form. The next step is to process the data. We will handle the form submission in the next lecture.